listening to the Sportageous Podcast, where sport gets smarter.
Hello, everyone. Today I'm joined on Sportageous Podcast by professional sports climber, maestro, and Olympic medal hopeful, Kyra Condie. Hey, Kyra. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, good. Thank you for coming on the show. Let's start things off with some non-climbing things, perhaps, and then we'll get into that eventually. I was reading that, you want to become a vet and you're interested in going into vet school. Did you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so I finished my undergraduate, and in the U.S., you have to do kind of 8 years of school to become a vet. So I've done the first 4, and now I still need to apply and get into vet school. But that's my, eventual plan. Kind of the only 2 things I ever wanted to be when I was growing up was either a professional climber or a vet. And so at the moment, I'm, making the professional climbing thing work. So I'm kind of going to do that until it stops working or that I'm over it, and then kind of pursue the veterinary thing. So
right. Do you like animals?
Yeah, I love animals, and I've always been interested in the medical field. And I personally like the idea of becoming a vet better than becoming a doctor, just for me. So
Fantastic. Okay, let's move on a bit about your early climbing journey. How'd you get into it? What sort of got you started?
I started climbing at a birthday party, actually, when I was I think I was 10, and the employee at the gym just kind of kept following me and being like, oh, you should try this one now, and then oh, you should try this one now. And then at the end of the birthday party, he told me that there was a team I could join. So I joined the team, and then I actually quit the team so that I could act in a play.
Right.
And then I ended up rejoining the team eventually, and then ever since then I've never stopped. I was pretty young, but actually a lot of the people I compete against started even younger than that. I kind of started seriously competing when I was 11. Didn't really start doing well until I was 14. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people who I compete against, started when they were probably more 6, 7, doing well in competitions starting then, pretty much so.
And do you think there are perks in perhaps starting that young in climbing? Because, with a lot of other sports, people don't really get into it until they hit their teenage. And do you think it's different in the case of climbing?
I think when you start that young, you learn about a lot of different body movements. So because you're so much smaller that you kind of come up with really creative ways to get through sequences and figure out ways to get up the wall, basically. And so if you start when you're already bigger, that you don't get that, but that I don't think is completely necessary. I think you also just become a lot more intuitive on the wall and have a less likelihood of injuries, actually, I think, because you get all the tendon prep and things like that you don't get if you start as an adult, especially. I still started quite young, so I still have that benefit, I think. But I'm glad I started when I did because, I never had a stage where I was burned out or anything like that.
So tell me, what is it that, you enjoy about climbing? And is there a certain discipline that you enjoy more than the other? Because obviously you do compete in all forms, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so I guess what I really like about climbing is that it's always different. Every time I go to the gym, I'm trying different things. There's different obstacles kind of that I'm trying to overcome too, skin's bad, condition's bad. Maybe I just don't feel good that day. And then also there's, every time you try a climb, there's something different about it. Or there's just a totally different climb. So if you're bored, you can always try something different, which I find very intriguing, especially in a individual sport. A lot of individual sports are either practice routines or, things like that. And so I like that it's always completely different. And I personally like bouldering the most because I enjoy the explosive, powerful movements that you get in bouldering, especially whereas in lead climbing you get a lot more controlled movements, which is also fun. But I definitely prefer jumping around and stuff.
I guess that's a good segue into this term, which is what people refer to your climbing style as. I've come across it a couple of times. Reckless abandon? Is that what it is?
Yeah. The story of that is from there was a live feed, and there was a couple announcers on the live feed who were talking about me while I was climbing. And yeah, they referred to me as having reckless abandon, which I thought was pretty funny, and I asked him about it. And he was like, "Oh no, like did that offend you?" And I was like, "No, it didn't, not at all." But like that's pretty funny. And so now I kind of become a little bit of a like I don't know, descriptor.
Yeah, right. And does it mean anything in particular? Like if you could describe it, what is it?
I think the biggest thing that they were talking about is that I don't tend to like hesitate while I'm on the wall very much. Like every once in a while you'll see people reach a section and like be unsure of what to do and like really hesitate. Mm-hmm. If you see me start to do that, usually I just try something, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, then I fall. Yeah, but I think that's really what it's talking about, which is funny. And I climb really fast.
And I guess touching on, what you were saying earlier about how you like the variety that bouldering presents and even lead to a certain extent, but you also speed climb.
I do, yeah. And so what I like about speed climbing, I guess, is that I'm constantly seeing progress. Sorry, I have a clock going off in the background. I don't know if you can hear it. That's right. But yeah, I really like that speed climbing. Like you can track your progress even more than you can in climbing. Like in climbing, there's grades of climbs, but it's a little bit arbitrary. Whereas speed climbing, it's always the same, and so you do get that like tracked progress that you don't really necessarily get climbing in climbing elsewhere. So I quite like that. And then I also just have a lot of respect for speed climbers. I think it's like super athletic and it's really exciting to watch, and so it's kind of fun to try it as well.
So you think that the standardization of speed climbing that's perhaps come in the last few years is a good thing in the sense that it enables you to sort of track that progress?
Yeah, I do really like that. And especially in training, I think it's really fun to be able to see yourself like literally be a second faster than you were like a few months or a year ago or something. At least for me, it improves that fast because the people who are like, really pushing the limits of speed, I'm sure their PRs are going at like 0.02 or something. But when you're starting off or when you're trying to perfect it, you can really drop a lot of time, which is really like gratifying.
Absolutely. Whenever I look at people speed climbing, it baffles me because I can't possibly do that myself. But now to the interesting part, or more like the controversial part, a lot of people have been criticizing the Olympic format because you get quite a few people who are either just speed climbers or you get people who do bouldering and lead, and suddenly you have everyone in one pool. Am I right in saying that you're one of the few major climbers around who can actually go through all three formats pretty well? And what do you think of the format?
Yeah, so I guess we'll start off with like the reason why there's like the three disciplines kind of all mashed together is that we were only really given one medal for the Olympics. And so we kind of had to come up with, we as in like the IFSC climbing in general, had to come up with a method that could either show off one discipline, so then you'd have to pick between bouldering, sport, or speed as which one would be in the Olympics, or you could pick this mashup version, which got to show everybody's ability, or show all the disciplines and hopefully lead to having all the disciplines in the Olympics eventually. And yeah, it's not ideal, but I think it personally is better than having just one discipline, shown off in the Olympics. The other thing is that the reason why it's like, you get these specialists who are involved is I think that was actually also deliberate. So you get a first place rank and then they're multiplied by each other. And so, if you get a first place in speed, you can get a 20th place in bouldering and lead, and probably still make it to the Olympics in the way that we've set up the qualification process. And the reason they did that is because they wanted to show the best in each discipline at the Olympics. They really want to, show off the best of the best in each discipline of the sport, which I think is really cool and a good thing to do. And then me personally, I definitely think I'm best at bouldering. I think I do have a decent base of all around, mostly only because I started doing speed as a youth climber, and so I had a little bit of a head start there. But I also have fallen behind of it because I don't have a speed wall where I live. Yeah, but I think a lot of people have really, embraced the combined format and taken it really seriously. So I think really everybody's become quite good all-arounders, so I can't say that I'm like the only one or anything.
So you think that it sort of forces everyone into a bit of a holistic approach, so they then have to focus on the significant differences that there are in speed climbing to bouldering and lead and vice versa?
I think somewhat people who are really, really, really good at one discipline haven't really needed to do that. like they definitely have and have focused on, you know, improving in the other two disciplines that they're maybe not specialized in. But if you can win one discipline, like I was saying, like you have a really good chance of doing well. And so I think it's kind of a balance because you don't want to, you know, train lead so much that you don't become as good at bouldering and then, you know, you don't want to get like middle of the pack in everything. You'd like to be able to do like really well in one and then middle of the pack in the other two, if possible.
Right. Generally, what are the key differences between the three main disciplines in terms of training, in terms of what you're expected to do?
Yeah, you know, something that I thought was really interesting was at the World Championships this year, pretty much everybody who was in the finals was a boulderer, like a boulder specialist who also happens to be quite good at lead. And I think the main reason of that is because bouldering translates pretty well to both speed and to lead, whereas lead doesn't necessarily translate that well to speed, especially. So like a really good lead climber has a ton of endurance, has like a really like calm head like while they're climbing, and they're usually really technical, very like good at finding positions on the wall that are like the least or the most efficient and like things like that. Whereas boulderers are kind of better at finding like the most, like almost the fastest way up the wall, or like making moves that are usually quite hard easier, but then don't have that massive endurance that a lot of lead climbers have. But that explosive power, I think, translates really well to speed because that's basically all you're doing all the time. Speed climbers in general have like a very like the best speed climbers have a different body type a lot of times, like stronger legs than a lot of the other climbers. Sometimes taller too, but you know, all speed climbers, there's good speed climbers who are taller and shorter. So, but yeah, I guess those are like kind of like the biggest differences. And so when you're training I personally focus on bouldering the most because I find that it translates really well to the other two, and then try to maintain in lead climbing. And then when I have a chance on the speed wall, I try to speed climb.
I guess with speed climbing, you touched on the body type. Would it be right to compare it to, say, sprinters and marathon runners? A lot of people use this as a comparison. Usain Bolt doing a 200-meter sprint is essentially like Raza Alipour climbing up a speed wall. And is that a good comparison, or would you say not really?
Yeah, I've used that comparison before. But I've kind of used it more as boulderers are like sprinters and lead climbers are kind of more like the marathon runners. But I think it's a little more related even than those two are. Yep. Like I think because lead climbing can be seen as just like kind of a bunch of boulders on top of each other. You climb a boulder into another boulder into another boulder. Especially the competition routes because they get harder and harder usually as they get higher. But yeah, I think it is a pretty valid comparison because it is almost like completely different sports doing multiple disciplines. Sure. So it's super challenging, and but I think I guess it's a good comparison.
And as a boulderer, what sort of holds do you like?
So I guess I personally love pinches the most, which is sad because I feel like I rarely get to like show off my favorite strength. But I also quite like kind of flat edges. So I've been training flat edges like a lot, like crimps, but not like really tiny crimps.
Yep.
I think honestly what I'm worst at would be like big slopers and tiny crimps, which are kind of the exact opposite. Mostly just because tiny crimps are kind of miserable to climb on. But I think it's more that a lot of other girls are really good at those, and I just don't have that. Like I'm better at like slightly bigger crimps with bigger moves usually. And then slopers I just never get to climb on because the gym I climb at has like kind of all hand-sized holds pretty much. And so I don't think I'm necessarily bad at slopers. I just haven't climbed on them quite as much as like other types of holds. So
sure. Would you say as a climber, as a boulder in particular, you are more static or more dynamic when it comes to your own climbing? And do you think it's necessary for a climber to have both abilities, or can they sort of make do with being better at one?
Yeah, I'm definitely more dynamic. It's something I've been working on for a long time, is being able to like slow down on the wall. I've been like adding in things where I do lock offs and stuff in my training, just to be better in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
I think you do need to be good at both, but if you have a skill, like if you're really good at climbing statically or really good at climbing dynamically, being able to, use that to your advantage is very real. So like, for example, sometimes it's more efficient to do a move dynamically when you could do it statically. If you can kind of swing up to it, that takes a lot less energy than if you just straight lock off to it. But then sometimes there are those moves that you need to do really slowly, otherwise you fall off. Like I've come across those before, where I just do a move a little bit too fast and then fall off because of it. And so like being able to know when to use what skill is really important.
Tell me a bit about what goes into all the training and the work behind the scenes. With climbing, you get a lot of those Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible 2 looking fabulous and all these little montages of climbers doing all these amazing feats. But obviously with any sport, and I can say with climbing, you have to do so much in the background just to improve the tiniest bit. What exactly goes on behind the scenes, I guess?
Yeah, like as far as training goes?
Yep.
Or just like everything? So I guess...
Nutrition as well, and the whole set of things.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, I guess there's a lot, like I'm training... I was doing 3 days on, 1 day off. I kind of switched it to more of a 2 days on, 1 day off to be able to do more intense days and have a little bit more rest. And I found that that's been really, really helpful.
Yep.
But, on those training days, you wake up and you get ready to go to the gym, pretty much. Go to the gym, and then the rest of your day is kind of centered around that. You, eat a good meal after the gym to make sure you recover well, you stretch, and then you kind of relax to make sure that your body's recovering. Sleep is a huge part of, pro athletes in general. We actually had this presentation that we went to at the, U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Center.
Yep.
That, we talked about sleep, and she recommended that 60 hours in bed a week for, a good athlete, which just sounds like so much.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, all of us were like, what? That's crazy. But I guess there's been studies even that where, they had, all the swimmers at Stanford, I think, actually get 60 hours in bed a week, and they all PR'd, 2 months later or something when they did it for, a long time.
Yeah.
By a lot, by, a second. So it's, it's very real. Sleep is huge. And then the mental aspect of training as well is, I think, one of the hardest things, just because I haven't had a coach for a really long time, and so I haven't had somebody there who's always believing in me or telling me that I can do it. So I've always had to do that for myself. Until recently, we have a U.S. team coach, but they don't live in Minnesota, they live back in Salt Lake City. So I think that's something that I've at least missed in my training for many years. So that's been a huge part of my training, is just staying motivated and getting myself to the gym and figuring out what I want to do when I go in. Do I want to lead climb today, or do I want to boulder today, or do I want to do after I climb workouts, things like that. So that's been a huge part of I guess my preparation, is kind of figuring out my training plan and things that I want to do. Yeah. But then as far as actual training goes, I've kind of figured out what I like. What I want to do, what I've noticed makes me improve, and things like that.
So you touched on how you haven't had a coach in a while. Obviously, you've got the team coach for the U.S. climbing team, but either a person really has to sort of know what they want in terms of how they want to train, or is there some other reason as to why you haven't had a coach in a while?
Yeah, so when I first started climbing, I joined a team at the gym, and that was when I was about 10, 11. But then the two coaches who I started with actually ended up quitting when I was about 13 to start their own gym, and so they were really busy for a while, and I didn't have the option of doing private lessons or anything like that. And then I kind of stayed on the team, I think, until I was about 14 and a half. And then with new coaches who I didn't know as much. And at that point, I was feeling pretty confident in my ability to, I guess, train myself. I maybe have my timeline off. I might have been more 15 or 16, but I don't really remember. But so when my coaches quit, I basically ended up quitting the team as well, and just going to the gym and training myself. with a friend who also I think quit the team, and so I had a training partner for a long time and like other people to climb with, but didn't have somebody technically coaching me like as far as like technique, like I mean like literally technique coaching, and that is both something that's like really shaped me as a climber, but also maybe hindered me a tiny bit. I think one thing is like it's made me become really self-motivated, and so if I'm in a situation where there's no coach around or something like that, I think I'm really good at getting it done, I guess. Right. Whereas maybe if you're used to always having a coach around telling you what to do, it's a little harder. But then I also think that I definitely could benefit from having someone else take that responsibility of figuring out what I want to do that day, or like telling me what to do. Like those things would be a lot of weight off my shoulders, I guess. So having somebody who I trust to do that would be pretty nice.
Do you think that finding that person is in itself a tough journey?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I'm really stubborn also, so like I'm not very easy to coach, to be honest. Like if you told me to do a workout, like I'll do it for sure. Like not in that way, but like if somebody's like, "Oh, you're doing that wrong," I'm like, "No, I'm not." Like, what are you talking about? So I find that a little difficult sometimes. Or if I like don't want to do something, like I think I should be bouldering and they tell me to lead climb. Like I'm not very good at it, especially I think probably having not had a coach for so long. And so it is really hard to find somebody who you both trust and agree with and will listen to. It's like a lot of work. So, but yeah, we do have like really great US team coaches, and I'm actually going to be moving to Salt Lake City, which is where everyone is based now, and so I'm really excited to be able to work with them more.
Tell me a bit about the team culture and what's that like. Often, all of you will be traveling to places all over the world.
Yeah, we actually all get along super well. Like, all the other girls on the team are some of my best friends. And then same with all the other guys are some of my best friends as well. I think some of the things, like, I guess, like this year, all the guys got into like a couple games on their phone that they can play together. So that was kind of funny. We were all playing like some phone games during downtime at the airport and stuff together. So that's something kind of funny that we got up to. But, a big thing is just kind of exploring cities. We haven't it's kind of funny. We go to all these really cool places around the world, and all we see is like different climbing gyms. Yeah. People be like, "Oh, you went to like Tokyo. Like, what did you look at?" It's like, "Oh, like, B Pump, Project, like Rocky, Base Camp." It's like, it's kind of funny, but it's also cool because you get to meet like the climbers from around the world and try to make friends in different places in that way. I would, when we're at a place for a little bit longer, like, sometimes we just go for the weekend. We get to definitely explore a bit, but we also get to stay together. And I think, like this year, I've definitely made a lot better friends with some of the people. Like, we were always friends, but we actually got to spend a lot more time together this year, which I think is really cool and really special because these people are, people who are giving 100% into the same thing that you are. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, right. And you mentioned Japan. From what I understand, Japan has by far the most climbing gyms in the world. Tokyo is apparently filled with them. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know in terms of having not been there, but that's what I read everywhere. Why do you think that is? How has climbing just blown up over there relative to other places?
I'm not really sure how it blew up so much, but like, yeah, they have tons of good gyms, and like all of the setting at the gyms is like amazing. Like a lot of like just like random climbers at the gym are super strong. I don't know exactly what it is that led to that. They kind of like fit gyms into like kind of funny areas sometimes. Like there's like, I was just walking down the street like in Shinjuku, and like I just like walked past the climbing gym and like did like a double take and like turned around and was like, what? Like, where did this one come from? I haven't even heard of this one, which is kind of cool. But I think their love of climbing in Japan or Tokyo especially was a big part of why climbing even got into the Olympics. Yeah. Because the first time that we tried for 2020, we actually got turned down as sport climbing. Right. Because they were only adding 2 new sports. And then when Tokyo got announced as the host city, they said, "Oh, well, like we can host 5 new sports. How about you do climbing and then some other ones?" Yeah. So it's really the Tokyo that we even have a spot in the Olympics and then therefore a spot in 2024 as well. So, but I don't know why but they're doing something right for sure.
And moving on to the Olympics once again, what are your climbing plans in the coming months in the build up to the Olympics? What have you got going on?
So for me, the focus this whole season kind of was to get qualified for Toulouse, which is like the next qualifying event.
Yep.
So to be top 20 in the combined overall World Cup rankings.
Yeah.
It's like a mouthful. And so for that ranking, they take your best 2 results in bouldering World Cups, your best 2 results in lead World Cups, and your best 2 results in speed World Cups. And going into these last 3, there was Kron, the lead World Cup. There's a comp this weekend, actually, in Xiamen in China,
Yep.
which is lead and speed. And then there's one in Inzai in Japan, and that's just lead. And so for me, I was sitting pretty nicely in the top 20. But it's also only a maximum of 2 per country. And I was second of the Americans.
Right.
So I then did pretty well in Kron, the competition in Slovenia, which put me into first of the Americans and even better into the top 20. So I felt pretty confident. So that's why I'm not in Xiamen this weekend, just so I was able to like stay a little bit longer at home and focus on training. Because the event in Toulouse is really coming up. And that I think is, a really great chance at qualifying because only 20 people will be there.
Sure.
And then after that, the last chance to make it, if you're an American, is from the Pan American Championships. But yeah, so like that's kind of, what my focuses are on at the moment.
Right.
I'll be pre-qualified for the team that will go to the Pan Americans if I don't qualify at Toulouse. So that's at least less stress as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But otherwise, I'm pretty excited about Toulouse. I'll know after next weekend if I'm like in it for sure. I feel pretty good about where I am, but I'll have one more chance to get a better lead result as well. Yep. Because going into Kron, lead was my 2 worst results. Like I had better 2 decent bouldering ones and then 2 decent speed ones, and then both my lead ones were terrible.
Yeah.
And so doing well in Kron, we're actually climbing not terribly finally. Really did a lot for my results. So
Pan Americans, will only one climber come out of that to have qualified?
Yeah, the winner. So it's the winner of Pan Am's.
When is the one in France set to take place?
That's at the end of November.
Oh, okay. So pretty soon. And like you said, you're going to find out fairly soon as well as to whether you get through. And I'm actually moving to Salt Lake City before that event so that I'll be able to train on slightly different terrain leading up to the competition. Since I live in Minnesota and we don't have a standard speed wall here. So I'm not really able to practice speed. And then we don't really also have a great facility for lead climbing. Yep.
At least especially hard competition style routes.
Yep.
Plus there's not really a lot of people who I could train with. Mostly honestly because a lot of people have a normal 9-to-5 work job. And so I climb during the day, and there's not a lot of people doing lead climb with. So I'm moving to Salt Lake City so I can both get on, competition style boulders, competition style lead routes, and the speed wall before that competition.
So you touched on the 9-to-5 jobs that a lot of people do. How significantly has climbing grown in the past few years? It's become more standardized. Obviously, the Olympics will add to that. Is it easy to, I guess, make a living out of climbing and then the sponsorships that come around it?
I would say it's not necessarily easy to get to that point. In order to get to the point where you're good enough at least to even be considered for big sponsorships takes a really long time. That process started when I was 11. Yeah. But then as far as the day-to-day work that you have as a pro athlete, there's not usually a ton. It's usually some emails, some planning, some Instagram stuff, things like that, which isn't necessarily that difficult. But I think it is hard, and it's a pretty competitive field to try to get good sponsorships and things like that.
Since you watch a lot of Netflix, what's your favorite TV show at the moment? What are you watching?
Oh man, I actually finished a lot, but I've been watching The Great British Bake Off recently. Love that show. It's very calming. I I just finished watching the latest season and last season of Orange is the New Black.
Oh yeah.
Which I like. Oh, and then I guess it's not Netflix, but I've been watching This Is Us, which is a great show.
Yeah.
Might only be available in the US, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But that one's really good too. And me and my parents watched that one together. So.
Right. Okay. The Great British Bake Off. I have to ask, have you ever watched the Australian MasterChef?
I haven't watched the Australian MasterChef. I've watched Zumbo's Just Desserts.
Right. Okay.
Which is also on Netflix. I watch pretty much all the Netflix baking shows. So.
Yep. So you like baking, I assume?
I actually don't, but I love watching people bake.
Yeah. Wow.
So.
Yeah, and I guess just as a final question to cap things off, what would you say to young kids, really young kids, young girls in particular, who have started climbing or going into sort of climbing or pushing their parents to take them to the gym to climb, be it bouldering, lead, speed?
Like any advice? I guess the biggest thing that I like to tell people when especially they're saying that they're stuck or in a plateau or, not getting any better is, like you will improve if you put the effort into it. I think it's easy to forget that like you can improve, if you're stuck in that rut, it's really hard. Yeah. But I mean, there's an exact correlation to how much effort you put in and how much better you'll get. And so, I always have a ton of respect for good athletes because I just know exactly how much effort they've put into becoming or to getting to where they are, and that anybody can do that. It takes really just that motivation. So I guess that's my biggest advice for people.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and good luck with everything. Hopefully, you get to the Olympics, and we'll be watching you on TV.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, it was fun to be on the show.
Thank you for tuning into the Sportageous Podcast. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.